All right. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to our Research and Winemaking webinar series. Thank you for being with us today. We hope you will enjoy this webinar and will develop knowledge and learn skills to be used in your vineyard and winery. I'm Dr. Aude Watrelot, an assistant professor and extension specialist of enology in the Department of Food Science and Human Nutrition at Iowa State University, and I'm co-hosting this webinar with my friend and colleague Drew Horton, who is a research specialist of enology at the University of Minnesota's Grape Breeding and Enology Project. Before starting the webinar, so here are just some instructions to follow. The webinar is currently being recorded, and the recording is going to be available on YouTube by the end of the week. The webinars of the past 4 years are already published and available with the link that I'm going to share in the chat box. Please type your questions that you have in the chat box that you can find at the bottom of your screen by clicking on the 3 dots that you may see. Your questions will be answered at the end of the webinar. Also, at the end of the webinar, you will receive an email to complete the Qualtrics survey about how we did today and what we will need to change for future webinars, as well as putting suggestions for future webinar topic. Please take a few minutes to complete that survey at the end. So today, we will have 2 presentations. Knapp from Stolpman Vineyards in California will share his experience and knowledge and challenges in making rosé and orange wines, particularly when developing, preserving, and maintaining the color in those wines. Then Dr. Cedric Saucier from University of Montpellier in France will explain the chemistry and the science behind color management of rosé wines with a specific focus on the evolution of phenolic compounds during orange and rosé winemaking. After these 2 presentations, we will discuss and answer any questions from the audience with Lane Moorlach from the Cellar Winery in Iowa and with Kevin Fifo from Covered Bridges Winery in Iowa. But let's start with the presentation of Knapp.
It gives me great pleasure to introduce my old friend Kyle Knapp, who was born and raised in Lompoc, California, which is in the oceanic or western edge of the Santa Ynez Valley. Kyle's very familiar with the surrounding hills and climate. He grew up camping and surfing up and down the coast. He has no college degree in viticulture and enology, but Kyle learned by doing. He began his winemaking career in 2005, which I personally remember as probably the greatest harvest I've ever worked, both in terms of quantity and quality. I'm sure Kyle remembers that. He worked his first harvest at Ballard Canyon's Beckman Vineyards, and like others who thrive on the arduous but rewarding experience, Kyle was hooked and immediately followed that harvest. He traveled to Australia for his second round. He returned to Santa Barbara County to work an additional harvest, and shortly thereafter assumed the role of Stolpman Vineyards assistant winemaker position, which he held that position until 2010. Then Kyle transitioned to Beckman Vineyards. He'd worked with their fruit before as their assistant winemaker until 2016, when he returned to be head winemaker for Stolpman Vineyards, the position that he still holds today. Kyle believes that time spent in the vineyard, working alongside of Stolpman Vineyards vignerons Ruben and Maria Solorzano, is one of the most important jobs for Kyle. Together, they can theorize and dream of the best and most efficient ways to make the best wines. Using a minimalist, stripped-down approach to the cellar to make distinctive wines of place and character. Kyle's winemaking style honors many of the tried and true winemaking methods like whole bunch carbonic fermentation, while also staying true to the Stolpman way of always growing and searching for new and improved ways of making world-class wines. You will often hear Kyle say that less is more, and purity results in better wines, rules he lives by. Along the way, Kyle began experimenting with winemaking for his own label, and in 2006 made his first press gang Cellars Grenache, although the real coming out year for that brand wasn't until 2010. Since the beginning, Kyle's focus has been on Grenache, Syrah, and Roussanne, all sourced from top vineyards in Ballard Canyon, Santa Ynez Valley, and the Santa Rita Hills AVAs. His wines are made in extremely limited quantities and beautifully capture the terroir, purity, and character of the region. Kyle, the floor is yours. You can share your screen.
Cool, thank you. Such kind words, Drew.
And they're all true.
All right. How's that look?
Perfect.
Perfect. All right. Okay. Thank you for being here, everybody. Thank you for having me. Very excited. Management of color is not really something I've thought too much about, to be honest. So it's kind of interesting to put this all down. And I'm looking forward to, learning something from Dr. Cedric. I think there's a lot there that I'll be able to put to use. Let's see. All right. Yeah, so I just want to talk a little bit about Stolpman Vineyards really quick. We've been farming for over 20 years. Little slice of heaven on the Central Coast. We have a rare limestone outcrop there that kind of comes down from the north, from Monterey through Paso, pops back up in Ballard Canyon where we are. We also have heavy clays and some sandy sites. But, really we've always been committed to the environment and to our employees. We've had, conscious, sustainable farming practices from the beginning. And that's also, we're certified organic and certified biodynamic. And we have a huge commitment to our vineyard crew, which we call La Cuadrilla. Years ago, we started a program where we make a wine that is a 10% of our total production, called La Cuadrilla de Stolpman. And what that does is we give blocks to the crew to basically empower them to be the farmer and not the worker. And so over the years, we've moved those blocks around and we've let them basically farm those vines the way they think they should. And then we make the wines, and then we circle back and we taste and we talk and we see how they could do it better, do it different. And the whole idea is to give them, sort of skin in the game and show them what we're doing. And they're not just farming grapes, we're farming exceptional wine. And with that wine, like I said, it's 10% of our production. And so what we've now done is we're able to give them weekly bonuses that affects the daily lives for them and their families. And then we end the year with a end of the year bonus where it's all by seniority, but they get a bonus for the holiday season. And the wine, the La Cuadrilla wine, started in the very beginning. It was 100 cases, and now we're up to 14,000 cases. And it's just a delicious wine that kind of encompasses the whole the whole site, basically. So it's a Grenache Syrah Mourvedre. But we really believe in that that wine and what we're doing there. So to give you a little bit an idea of our little place in the world. Sorry, this is a little bit zoomed in, but this is Central California, the elbow that you would see. So I'm here in Lompoc. I was born and raised in Lompoc. Our winery is in Lompoc, and the vineyard is here in Ballard Canyon. And so we have a unique transverse east-west mountain range. It's actually the longest in the West Coast. And so what we benefit from is this sort of opening here by this arrow we have ocean influence. So Ballard Canyon is about 20, 25 miles to the east. And so we get this ocean influence that comes in, and during our growing season, the afternoon winds that blow in from the Lompoc coast cool our vines and give them much needed reprieve from those harvest days and those heats. So where's my cursor? So and it's another thing that's cool is Lompoc is 14 miles from the coast, and oops, 14 miles from the coast, and every mile that you go inland towards Ballard Canyon, it increases about a degree in temperature. So it could be 70 in Lompoc and 90 to 100 in Ballard Canyon. So yeah, it's a very very kind of unique growing region, and Lompoc is really known for Pinot Noir, Chardonnay, some cool climate Syrahs and Grenaches. And then of course it gets warmer out towards Solvang and Ballard. Okay, a little bit about the winery. We've heavily invested in concrete fermenters. These are 4-ton fermenters. We also have a few 5-ton, a few smaller fermenters. We really like what they do, like our estate wines, give them a nice kind of micro biome and gives them good texture and mouthfeel in the wines. A lot of whole bunch in our winery. This is my dog Marley, and then this is me cleaning out a tank. But kind of day in the life, I guess. All right, so on to Rosé. Like I said, I haven't really thought too much about color in Rosé, but I feel like you have to have in mind what you want to have your finished product to be and what's in the bottle. If you're looking for light rosé, a dark rosé, pink, copper, I think that all really matters, because how you want that finished product to look like is going to determine how you process your grapes, whether you soak or you don't soak and go straight to press. In the past, we've actually done some carbonic trials where we did a whole bunch carbonic for about 7 to 10 days and then pressed it. The problem with that is that your wine is really dark, so it could really only be a blending component. So we've found that numerous picks helps. I like to do like an early acid pick where you're bringing it in 17 to 20. It's green. You're going direct to press. You're getting a very light wine, very minerally driven, really high acid and kind of astringent. But knowing that you're going to do another 1 or 2 picks that are a little bit riper with more mature berries and more mature skins, so you'll have more color as well. And then know that you're going to blend in the end, and you're going to kind of get to where you want to go. So grape variety matters also. I hear back in Minnesota you guys are dealing with Marquette, which sounds very very dark. So you're kind of, you have a lot there to manage with color. Out here we're using Syrahs, Grenaches, Mourvedre, Pinot Noir are the most common grapes, I would say. I won't really go into this too much because I'll let Dr. Cedric do that. But anthocyanins are the main source of color in your wines. But there's also lots of other things in play, and there's also other phenolic compounds that are in play there as well. Yeah, so like I said, you can go to soak, for a few hours. So when I first learned how to make wine, very typical was to destem and soak, 4 or 5 hours or even overnight. Syrah usually is you destem it and it's almost ready to go because it's so dark. But stuff like Grenache, Pinot Noir, Cinsault, Mourvedre, those kind of grapes are lighter skin wines, and they need more time to soak. But almost always you have darker wines, darker rosés. So that was the way I learned. And in the past 4 or 5 years, I've sort of completely moved away from destemming and soaking, and almost 100% is just direct to press. What I like about that is, as you press harder on the wines, you get darker color. And if you do number of picks, you can sort of fine tune that finished color. And I mean, there's also other factors. I feel like I'm going fast on this, but things to consider is the color that you get from pressing is not the color you're going to end up with. When you sulfur, you're going to be bleaching the wines, and so you're going to lose color there. Most likely you're going to fine, so that color is going to drop off there as well. And then, of course, if you're going to filtrate or do filtration, you're going to strip a little color as well. So those are just kind of things to keep in mind, that when you're making the wine or you're making the blend, you got to kind of think, okay, it might be a little darker than I want, but you're going to be losing color with all those sort of movements and activities. Let's see. That is some freshly filtered rosé. I didn't have a whole lot of pictures to show any, before and after, but this wine right here is probably typical of what our rosés are looking like these days. Like I said, when I first got in the wine industry and was learning to make rosé, it was all riper grapes, like 23 bricks, darker wine, darker juice, and so our rosés were darker. And it was good, but for me, what I've realized now that I'm 20 years into this is I don't necessarily like the alcohol that comes with that 23 brick juice. I don't prefer the color being so dark, although I don't really care. It just has to taste good. But also you lose acid as you get to those higher bricks. And with those higher bricks, your flavor profile changes. So you're getting more watermelon, Jolly Rancher, kind of strawberry candied fruits. And with the lower bricks, like we're talking 20, 21, you're getting more of a minerality driven stone fruit, these kind of pure, I guess, characteristics. And so that's kind of what I more prefer. And you're getting lower alcohols, 12%, something like that. So for me, you don't have that alcohol sort of almost like that retronasal vapor. And it's just, to me, it's a little bit more pleasant. So there are some finding agents that you can use to manage color. Again, I think I'll let Dr. Cedric go more into this, but this is something I've used in the past. Polymers Rosé is just, I think that's a commercial product, but it's basically a combination of vegetable protein and PVPP, but it decreases phenolic compound content and helps stabilize the hue of the rosé, basically by taking out and eliminating oxidase like phenols that can alter the wine. Yeah, and I think PPV there is doing more of the heavy lifting there, and with some of those things. The cool thing with this product, though, is that it works on astringency and tannin that you can get from like the hard press. So and people don't really know what that is if you're not familiar with those terms. When we make rosé, you put the grapes in a bladder press. So you have a bladder that inflates with compressed air on one side, and on the other side of the drum, there's a perforated side wall, and you're basically squeezing the grapes, separating the juice from the skins and the seeds. And to get your yields, you increase the pressure. And so you have your early pressings or light pressings. They're usually, less tannic, less color. And as you press on them, on the grapes more, you end up with darker juice, a little bit more tannic, a little bit less acid, because you're starting to press on the seeds, the skins, and the stems. So you're starting to pull out more potassiums. So there is a fine line of how you press, how much you press. Typically, winemakers will do a press cut. So you'll get your early soft presses separated into a tank, and then you get your late hard presses into a separate tank. And the idea there is to give you options. And hard press can be treated differently, can be fined differently. Something I have on here is that you can use carbon to take out color if it's a little bit too dark. And so the idea is you can treat each tank differently, get them kind of where you want them, and then either blend them in the end or not. Ode, how am I doing on time?
You still have about 10 minutes.
Okay.
Hey, you're doing fine, Kyle.
Okay.
Good pace.
Orange wine. So orange wine is something I've always loved the idea of. My first vintage was, this is kind of crazy to think about. My first vintage was 2005. And fast forward to 2009, I made my first orange wine. Because when I had my first orange wine, I just fell in love with the idea. The wine was interesting, cool, something totally different than any other wine I had. You really unlock a lot of crazy exotic aromatics. There's usually more tannin and crazy structure, more phenolics, exotic aromatics, and kind of wild characteristics. And I just thought the whole idea was super cool. And so pretty early on, I made an orange wine out of Malvasia Bianca, which is highly aromatic, super tannic though. The wine was good. It was interesting. At that time, I didn't really know what to do with it because I really had no plan to start a wine project. So I think I ended up selling it. But yeah, so that was the first wine I made, orange wine I made, and then I don't think I made another one until 2016 when I started making wine. I'd been making wine for myself for a few years, and so I started orange wine for myself with Grenache Blanc. Different white grapes will give you a different orange hue. Gewürztraminer can give you a little bit more brown orange. Grenache Blanc can give you kind of a lighter yellowed, like orange. Sauvignon Blanc, Chardonnay are kind of an interesting, light hue. This is actually something I didn't really know or think about, but white grapes lack anthocyanins. So that is something that's in red grapes and not white grapes. So that's pretty cool. So it's actually other flavonoid molecules that give orange wine the color. Thought that was interesting. This picture in this slide is a funny story. You know, there's a lot of romanticized views of wineries and winemaking and how we do what we do and get to the end result. But this picture is a classic example of what happens to winemakers and how you have to adjust and just keep moving forward. So this day we were supposed to get some red grapes and white grapes. White grapes are for orange wine, but the destemmer decided to break, so we couldn't do any destemming. So okay, what the hell? We'll do some whole bunch Chardonnay for orange wine, knowing that yes, it's going to be more tannic, it's going to be more phenolic. So we did it. We kept it in there, I think, just under 2 weeks, and the wine was fierce. It was tannic, but we pressed it into barrels, let it ferment in barrels. You know, the one thing is, as winemakers, everything is a tool. You know, you don't want any one thing to be your crutch. Everything should be a possibility, and everything should be just a tool in the toolbox. So oak barrels are a tool. So we decided to ferment orange wine in the oak barrels, knowing that there's pores and there's interaction with oxygen. And so we knew that those tannins will eventually soften and round out. The wine turned out beautiful, turned out really good. But it was an interesting trial, you know, trial by fire, I guess. Stop, macerate, and listen. Yeah. The length of skin contact can and sometimes determines the type of orange wine you make. Typically, I think winemakers will go days or weeks on the skins. Usually, you want to be effective. If you're going to do that short of time, you're going to get the grapes in the tank, and you're going to want to inoculate them with either fermenting juice or commercial yeast. Because what you want is that short-term skin contact to be as effective as possible. And generally, to get any color, you're going to need heat. And so with fermentation, you get heat. So if you're going to go 7, 12, days, whatever that is, you're going to want to get that ferment going, so you get a little bit of extraction there. And then there's months and years that you can do. I was always a fan of doing longer. So with my own wines for Pressgang, in 2006, when I first started orange wines, right off the bat, I did 10 months. So I think I have a picture. I'll go back to that. But yeah, longer doesn't always mean more color. Like I said, I've done Grenache Blanc in an oak barrel for 10 months on the skins. It was actually a little bit lighter than someone that did like 12 days with Grenache Blanc on the skins. I thought that was pretty interesting. So what I assume is that there's a bell curve with color, because I know that, I've been doing the almost year-long skin contact for many years now, and I've always noticed a bell curve in tannin. So there's a 6 months or 7 months where tannin kind of increases, and it gets more phenolic and more weird. And then at some point it reaches a peak, and then tannins start to either precipitate out, fall out, or bind. I have a feeling Dr. Cedric will have an answer. But I've noticed that, around 9 months, 10 months, tannin really seems to soften and fall out. So, and I think skin, not skin, but color may have a same sort of arc in color starts to fall out somehow, binds with something. Yeah, so here is Brett. This year, he was the poor intern that was selected to fill this barrel for me. So this is a 500-liter barrel, so 130-gallon puncheon. And so it fits about a half ton of grapes. And I think it took almost an hour and a half to fill this barrel with a scoop at a time through that funnel. And so this is how I was doing it for years. I was basically filling the puncheon to fermentation height, letting it ferment, and then topping it up once fermentation had subsided. And then once it was full, it would age in there on the skins for 10 months. And, that next harvest, I would pull the barrel down, siphon the juice out. Then you have to put that barrel on its head and then take off all those galvanized bands and take the head off, scoop it out, press it. I have pictures of that. And then basically have to put the barrel back together. What I thought was really cool about this is that it would ferment and age 10 months in this barrel. I removed it, pressed it, put the barrel back together. And then once I pressed the wine would go back into the same barrel and then stay in there for another 4 or 5 months. I always thought that was cool. Yeah, so this is the same barrel, taking the head off, scoop all this out. And so this picture here is after 10 months on the skins. Looks almost like milk. Yeah, and so what I'll do is press the wine goes back to barrel, and it'll sit there through harvest, and the next spring usually will get bottled. There's some cases that I didn't bottle all of the wines. One year I did this approach. I did in barrel, and then I also did in a concrete pyramid. It was fascinating. The concrete pyramid is way more tannic and I guess tight and less evolved than what was in barrel. And so what I did there that is I bottled the stuff that was in barrel and the wine that was in the concrete. I pressed it to barrel and it stayed in barrel, and I left it in barrel for a couple of years, and it finally softened and evolved and actually got darker, I think, as it concentrated. I wonder if I could play this video. Yeah, here we go. See if this works. So this is me filling a concrete pyramid, scoop at a time. So I got smart. I got this concrete pyramid, and it was a lot easier to fill and empty because it had a door on it. And here, this is VO. VO is pretty cool. It's very aromatic. And as far as color management for orange wines, I think it comes down to grape and length of time on the skins, and maybe trial by error. Let's see. Yeah, here's the pyramid. This is a cool vessel for orange wine. Let's see, there's a little video. So this is orange wine fermenting. So this is probably after, I don't know, 3-4 days once it got going. But yeah, as far as color management with orange wines, they definitely, the longer an orange wine sits in barrel, it will get darker, I think, just through concentration and oxidation. And yeah, so this orange wine here, it was 10 months on the skins, and then this is 2 years in barrel. And it's really cool what starts to happen, after that first year in barrel. The wine darkens, it gets concentrated aromatics, a little bit darker brown orange hue, and it really, really changes the wine. let's see. I don't think I have too much more. Oh yeah, conclusion. Look at that. Yeah. Are you making a gateway orange wine? So are you making a, easy drinking, light amount of skin contact, or kind of an all-in orange wine where you're going to go 10 months to a year on the skins? It's really kind of what you're going for. They're soft, delicious orange wines when you're kind of on that, few days to a week skin contact, or a little bit more tannic, phenolic, a little bit more evolved, but also wild when you go longer. And then does color matter to you? I mean, that's really, really kind of means a lot in the conclusion, because it's kind of nice to just see what you get, sometimes, and let the wine be what it's going to be. Purity is always best, and why mess with it? But I think that's it.
Right.
All right.
Thank you so much, Kyle.
Yeah, that was
Very
awesome.
good presentation. Very interesting. I don't know if a lot of attendees have questions, but I do have some questions for you that we will answer at the end.
Cool.
So if you have any questions, please use the chat box, and we're going to answer to those questions at the end with the panelists that we have. So now we're going to have the presentation from Dr. Saucier. Dr. Cedric Saucier graduated from Bordeaux University in France with a PhD in enology. He did then a one-year postdoc at UC Davis with Dr. Waterhouse, that I know really well, in the Department of Enology and Viticulture. He returned to the University of Bordeaux to become an assistant professor in enology. Then he moved to Canada to become an associate professor at the University of British Columbia until 2013. Since 2013, he's a full professor at the University of Montpellier in France and the head of enology in the Department of Pharmacy. And his research focuses on grape and wine phenolic chemistry. And so today, Dr. Saucier is going to talk a little bit more about the chemistry and the science behind color management, focusing maybe more on rosé wines. All right. Cedric, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Aude. I hope you can hear me and see my screen.
Yeah, if you can. Yeah, that's perfect.
It's working good? Okay. So thanks for the introduction and the kind invitation to participate in this webinar, which of course is a very interesting topic that I did a lot of work in, especially in the rosé, and I'm going to show some of the work today. But I will give maybe some ideas about orange wine as well, even if less research or almost no research has been done so far, but it's becoming increasingly popular in the world right now. 2000 years after it was probably the first kind of wines in Georgia. But so we'll talk a little bit about this later. So indeed, yeah, we did work on these old nice shades of rosé wines. And the reason we work on that, it's I don't know if it's the case in the US, but certainly in France, rosé wine gained a lot in popularity. So that's, you can see on that graph, it's the sales in the market shares in the supermarket from 1990 to 2016. And you can see the share of the rosé wine was multiplied by 300%. And the rosé wine has taken some big market shares at the expense of the red wines. And I think it's probably due to the global warming, as it's true that if there are more and more hot weather and hot month, tendencies to maybe switch a little bit to lighter or or wines that you can drink at a cool temperature. There was one colleague's one friend that works in a wine stores near Montpellier, and he told me rosé wine, it's the kind of wine you most of the year you say, why are we producing such type of wine? And then in August and July you understand why, because it's so hot and you don't want to drink a very full-bodied red wine for sure. And it's they have a high diversity of colors with different hues, intensities, so it can be very light, and I'll show you that they have become lighter in France and probably in the world, and different style as well. But still, I have to say that some producer, a tiny amount, but some producers are still producing darker rosé wine. But the tendency probably for 30 years now is to produce lighter rosé wine. So each year in France, south of France, you have the Centre de Rosé. It's experimental center in south of France. They organize a kind of a competition and they measure the color of the samples. And you see that France tends to have a lighter color, especially the one in south of France compared to other countries in Europe. And then if you look at the evolution of the amount of color during the years, you can see that in the south of France, so Provence area, but in the rest of France or in the world, you have a big decrease of the color. And so the evolution is mainly to produce lighter wines. So is it due to global warming? I don't think so, because if you have maybe you can have a slight decrease in anthocyanin content, but on the other hand, they will be more extractable. So you will have even darker rosé. So people do, it's the choice of the winemakers to produce lighter wines. And they can do that by controlling the temperature, for instance. But of course, there are lots of fining agents. We'll talk about PVPP a lot in this talk that I use to remove the color. And about color management and aroma, you will see it's the two aspects of a good rosé wine. So the idea would be to have a light pink color like this. And it's achievable. Certainly, it's not too complicated. Any winemakers can do that. But then the challenge is also to maintain that nice color, even for 1 year or even 2 years. It's very hard to maintain and to avoid a rapid evolution to orange color. So it's not that easy, because in the case of red wines, we have the tannins, much more tannins, and they stabilize the color. When in the case of rosé wines, certainly they are more fragile and it's difficult. So as the same as in white wines, we don't want too much polyphenols in rosé wines because too much polyphenols can result in browning. And on the aromatic sides, there is a trap of thiol types aroma compounds. And so to adjust color and reduce phenolic contents, that's the case in rosé, but also in white wines. We often use the fining with PVPP. So we have done some research to understand the effect on PVPP, not only on color, which is obvious, of course, but what kind of polyphenol are removed, what kind of effect can we expect on the aroma, and especially the thiol sides of it. So we did some experiment treated some rosé wines with PVPP. So we took Cellar Rosé wine, and if we compare before and after the finding treatment, you can see there is a lightness. If we measure the color in the LAB colorimeter, if you are familiar with that, so the L is the lightness, and then A and B, they measure the red or the yellow aspect of the wine. So you increase a little bit the luminosity, it's a finding process, and then of course you will diminish the color, and then the hue and the other parameter of the color, you can express that with LAB or calculate angle and chroma, but it's the same. So of course the color is partly removed. But how are the polyphenol affected? We know they will decrease by the treatment, but are all the polyphenols partially removed in that treatment? So to look deeper in that on the phenolic aspect, we have analyzed the wines before and after treatment. So my colleagues at INRA Montpellier, they have developed a method to do rosé wine analysis to quantify lots of polyphenols and a little bit of other compounds. And so we could use that already developed method. So the method not only analyzes anthocyanins, of course, but also some small uncolored polyphenols such as gallic, caphtoric, quercetin, catechin, and tannins. But they might have indirect effect on color, though. They can still have what is called copigmentation effect. So even if they are uncolored, they can participate to the color, and that can be quite significant in the case of rosé wine, actually. But still, of course, the anthocyanin were measured. So in our case, we have, for example, malvidin, and then acetyl malvidin, and then coumaroyl malvidin. So that's the compounds, the colored compounds you will have in skins. So you have one sugar attached, and on that sugar you can have other compounds that make the anthocyanins even darker. And when you look at the analysis of polyphenols before and after the treatment, you can see that not all the polyphenols are attached to PVPP the same way. For example, the tannins of the tannin family, the monomers, dimers, trimers, they like PVPP a lot. And surprisingly, we're surprised about the results. The anthocyanins, they were not that much absorbed on the PVPP though, except the coumaroyl glycosides, a special kind of anthocyanins, and other compounds were less affected. But flavonols and stilbens were intermediate in the affinity. So that's quite interesting that the control in color might not be due to the removal of anthocyanins alone, but to other compounds that, as I said, might exert indirect copigmentation effect. So we had some real measurement on real rosé wine, and so we thought it would be fun to try to put some models to understand at the molecular level. Could we predict the result of what we observe by computer simulation? So we discussed with a theoretical chemist in Chile at the University of Talca that were already working in polymers, and they did some quite super cool work of computer simulation where they did put a model of PVPP. So that's the gray particle here, and then in green you have the polyphenols, and you can see that the polyphenol, they are attached at the surface of the PVPP particle. So in a way, I like to see PVPP because it's not the winemaker that have used it know in that webinar that it's not a soluble product. It is removed. It's not an additive actually. It's removed. It's not resoluble, but it's make like big particles that are kind of artificial protein in a way. So it's quite similar to an image of a globular proteins, and then you can see the polyphenol can be trapped at the outside or inside of some of the pores on the particles. And what was cool that they did, that's computer simulation, and they could correlate the result on the wine to the theoretical energy interaction calculation, which was quite nice. But beyond color, we have an effect on aroma. So that was the fun part, because we did other experiments on different grape juice. So we got the control on your left, and then you will add some different PVPP particles, and then some fining agent. And then you can see that if we some compounds like 3-MH or 3-MH acetate, they can be increased after fining. So it's quite a strange result actually. So it's almost like you removing the phenolics and then you have more thiols. So it's quite strange. And it's a dose dependent effect. So at 20 grams per liters, you have more. If you add more PVPP, you have even more. And then if you have 60 grams per hectoliters, it starts to decrease. So you don't want to put too much. It seems to have an optimum dose in that effect. But it's quite nice that it can, in some case, result in wines that are more aromatic. So why is that? We don't think it creates aroma, but it certainly removes some phenolic compounds that can trap the aroma. There's no aroma precursor in PVPP, right? But you remove some polyphenols, and by removing, you help to have less thiol traps. And then if you have too much, maybe at some points you absorb some precursor. So that's something to be understood. But then now you understand why the tendency of lighter color of rosé wine is explained. Because you could say, oh, maybe it's the consumer, it's just like a fashion, they like rosé, and in 5 years they will be bored and they will go back to dark rosé. But no, they never went back. Why is that? Because they are those wines, they look more like white wines and they are more aromatic. So it's a different style. So it would be maybe true for most of the south of France wines that's more based on thiol, but still there are other ways. If you really want a dark rosé wines, certainly you can work on the ester sides, other molecules, and can have another type of rosé wine. I don't have time to explain the recipe here, but it's certainly possible if you really like the dark rosé. We can make it aromatic as well. And beyond color and aroma, we did some fun analysis to try if we can figure out the origin of rosé from different parts of France. So we sampled some commercial wines and measure classical chemistry or color, such as ethanol, volatile acidity, and so on. And we cannot really predict the origin of the wine based on that. It's not very robust, so we need more deep chemical analysis. So we took 60 rosé wine in 2 sets of 30. One is to build a model, and the second one is to do independent validation sets of samples. And we did some mass spectrometry analysis and some statistical analysis. I won't go into detail here, but it has been published. And we were able, into that big mass spectra, to extract just very few ions that would be significantly differed from one region to another. So we took specifically phenolic compounds, and by doing this algorithm, we're able to discriminate rosé wine from Bordeaux or Languedoc, so near Montpellier, and Provence wine, not only in the learning database samples, but also independent validation data sets. So went from 6,000 of peaks to only 8 peaks, and by making a ratio, dividing one value by others, we were able to discriminate the region, which was quite cool actually. So take a message. So color is not enough to discriminate the region of rosé wine. As the Little Prince here said, what is essential is invisible to the eye. We need to go deeper at the molecular level. And the impact on aroma is very important as well. And specific polyphenols can be used, as we saw, to discriminate rosé wine. So some words about orange wine. As we said, orange wine is it has been done, probably was kind of the first wine done 1,000 years ago, and then they were abandoned, and then now it's they came back on the market because we want novelty, and the color is quite nice. The difficulty is not as difficult for the color, I would say, but as for me, orange is easy to get, but the aroma stability or the freshness and is not that easy to get. So I want you to have an overview of chemistry without any molecules. So that's the challenge. So it was a long time ago studied for red wines that the evolution of the main polyphenols, which are anthocyanins, they can degrade into smaller pieces, such as phenolic acids, and then being oxidized, and then they become orange. Sometimes they can be stabilized by other small non-flavonoid compounds making pyranoanthocyanins. Some of them are dark, some of them are orange as well. And then on the other side, you have the tannins. The tannins, they are here in, for sure, that will be more for orange wine. And the tannins, they can polymerize or depolymerize, or they can be oxidized as well and degrade, and that will become orange. They can also react with small compounds such as aldehyde, and then they make some first uncolored polymers that will turn into orange at some points. And of course, as you know, especially for red wines, anthocyanins and tannins, they can bridge together and make new anthocyanins, tannins type of polymers that could increase the color. But if you wait a long time, all of these different chemical pathway, they will all end up to orange compounds. So in the end, all that chemistry, different pathway, they all turn to orange compound. So it depends how much time you want to wait, how much oxygen you can introduce. Certainly there is a way you can more or less have more or less orange color. So one way is to wait in 2 barrels indeed, or maybe you can force the acceleration or work maybe at the juice level as well, use or not use SO2. So orange is the natural color for all the wines at some points. But it's true that not, as had been said, varieties are equal because you will have different level of phenolic compounds. maybe not tannins, but smaller one as well. That's it's not on that pictures. And also there is some enzymes into the skins that will oxidize and make those orange compounds much more quicker. So we can play a little bit with the color. Might be, in my opinion, more easy than to stabilize the orange color than avoid the orange color in the rosé wine. Anyway, for those interested, if there are some crazy chemists like me in the webinar, they can certainly go deeper and look at the paper we've published. And with that, I'm happy to answer any question, at least the one that we understand. We don't understand everything because it's very complex, as you can imagine. And I will also, before finishing, thanks all my colleagues locally at the University of Montpellier that did some either chemical analysis or statistical analysis, and also my colleagues in Chile that did the molecular modelization calculation work, which were very nice as well. And thanks for your attention.
Excellent. Thank you, Cedric, very much. That was a lot of deep information, especially on PVPP, which I've been using for years. Didn't know how it worked, but we do a lot of machine picking here in the Midwest, and so white grapes picked by machine sort of get that pre-soak, and so PVPP seems to help not with color management as well, and with sort of green and bitterness notes in the juice. Of course, it does depend, as Kyle was talking about it, how hard you press and whether you do press fractions. But I'm already starting the discussion before my time.
Sure.
Do we have any questions on the chat box?
We do have some questions, but let me introduce quickly Lane and Kevin. Thanks for being part of the panel discussion and question and answers. So Lane is currently the winemaker at the Cellar Winery in Iowa, and Kevin is the winemaker as well and co-owner of Covered Bridges Winery in Iowa. So I don't know if you have made, so I know that Lane, you've made orange wine. Kevin, have you tried making orange wine?
Not intentionally.
All right. So just to start the discussion, one question that was asked a little bit for Kyle mainly, have you tried graphene-based filters to remove color?
Have I used what?
What kind of filter?
Graphene-based. Let me write that to everyone.
Oh.
All right.
Oh, graphene.
Yeah.
Graphene based. I've never heard of it myself. Anybody?
No, I've never heard of it. No, no, I have not. I've used carbon to take care of color, and it can really do a couple things. It can strip color, but also strip aromatics and the flavor profile. So you have to be real careful. You can't be heavy-handed.
Do you use activated carbon as an addition, or are you using filter sheets impregnated with carbon?
No, it's like in powder form. So
Okay.
you add it during fermentation, and so it's percolating and in suspension, and then after fermentation settles out, and then you find cold stabilized filter generally.
And so that's related to the question that Mark was asking about the benefits of PVPP versus activated carbon to remove color, because you talked a lot about PVPP, but what would be the benefits of using that compared to activated carbon? Would it be just for the aroma or for other reasons?
Yeah, there are two questions. There was, well, let's answer that first question, the benefit of PVPP versus activated carbon for removing color. That's an easy one. PVPP is in fact just touching the phenolics. It doesn't remove the aroma compounds. It doesn't remove any proteins, maybe unfortunately, but it's quite specific to phenolics. And more or less to some families, as we have seen. So it's certainly the activated carbon will remove even more color, but you have to be cautious about the quantity because you will remove aroma precursors and aroma as well. And the PVPP, that was our surprise, that not only you don't remove the aroma, but you even create, well, it's not really true, but it seems to create aroma, but you prevent aroma by removing phenolics. So that's more, that's really something very interesting and unique in the PVPP. And the second question, which is in line with that, is when was the PVPP applied, pre-fermentation or post? So it depends. For our experiment, just to understand what phenolics can be removed with PVPP at the lab level, we did post because it was more easy and quicker to do that. But for the aroma experiment, it was small-scale winemaking techniques, because it's true that people are mainly using that product if they can during the first at the beginning of alcoholic fermentation. So why is that? There is some reason for that. It works better. Why does it work better to use that product during fermentation? First, it's practical because you have to rack anyway your wine at that stage. The yeast are creating some movement, so it's easy. But also there are some interest to do that. Why is that? It's because if you look at the aroma side, and if you consider the thiol family, at the beginning, they are more in the form of precursors. So you can remove some phenolics, and then if you don't put too much PVPP, you don't remove the precursors. So less phenolics and the same amount of precursors, you end up with more released thiol in your wines. So it's not completely magic, because at the end, still, terroir still exists in the product, because you still need some precursors, right? If you're really your precursor level and your soil is not that great, and in your juice you don't have any precursors, PVP won't by magic create your aroma, right? But if you are close to the threshold or slightly above the thresholds, then it can have a big effect. And at the other end, if you have a super terroir with tons of precursors, it will preserve that aroma, but you will maybe not notice the difference because you have so much thiol anyway. So, but it's quite useful in between, and it can certainly have a nice effect both on color and to enhance or preserve the aroma. And that's why, as I said, that's why the tendency or that fashion of a light rosé wine have lasted and continue to last so long. It's because they are more to the white side and more aromatic. If for any reason the chemistry would have been the opposite, for any reason, the darker rosé would have more aroma, maybe the trends would have been the opposite, and everybody would like to get more. And indeed, if you macerate, you say, oh, I have more precursors, but still you have more flavanols as well, and tannins, and it's something else. So there's a nice indirect effect that can be used
That's
for
where
white wine as well.
that's where it's challenging for winemakers of the Midwest when they work on hybrids, which is really rich in anthocyanin, diglucosides, but the color is really, really deep. And Kevin and Lane and probably Kai, you can talk about that, the deep color, red color that you have when you make a rosé. How so that's a question I have for you, Kevin. What type of treatment do you apply on your rosé wines to remove a little bit of that color? Do you use PVPP?
I've used a little bit of everything. So you're right, color is a challenge here in the Midwest with the hybrids, especially as the grapes get more ripe. I found that the colors will really deepen. So Kyle mentioned in his presentation planning, and that's key if you're going to do the rosé. The first one that I did, I had planned it all out, and then my brother decided to get married that weekend, so I had to be out of town. So I left instructions with my team to get the fruit in, press it immediately, and just put it in the tank, and I deal with it when I got back. And it was the color of a deep red when I got back. So I was very disappointed. Activated carbon took out a couple of levels of that. But I think our color compounds tend to be very soluble and very mobile is kind of how I describe it based on my experience. So with a typical red, I'm adding tannins early in the process to help bind that color and keep that color in solution. With the rosés, I specifically do not. So as they age, as they go through finings and rackings, that color will naturally kind of fall out. Activated carbon helps. I looked up my notes. I was about 1.5 grams per gallon during fermentation. Does keep it in solution. I think is a little bit more effective than post-fermentation. Later in the process, based on tasting trials, I've used PVPP to help deal with some of the astringency. The harder the press that you get, of course, the more astringency you're going to get. But you know, I'm on my 3rd iteration of these. I think a harder press tends to release a little bit more of those aromatic compounds. So it's a balancing act. I've done the soft press. I'll take the first 2/3 or so of it. I get better color management, but I have less vivid aromas in those wines. So I think I'm going to go back to a full press on it and deal with the color. I'm less concerned about color here in the Midwest. I kind of laughed when Kyle had in his presentation that really pale pink rosé. The 3 that I've got, the one that is in the bottle right now, I would best describe as a copper color that Kyle used. The 2 that I have going that are 2024, one is a cranberry type of a color, so kind of a mid-range, and one is very much plum. And the difference on those is absolutely the timing of the harvest. One came in at about 22 bricks, one came in at about 25. Really, they were only about a week apart, but they were opposite sides of the state. So 200 miles. 200 miles in California is a lifetime away. Here in Iowa, a little less so. So it does take a lot of planning. And I've been really happy with the results. On the orange side of things, I don't explicitly go for the orange. Well, I guess I'll finish up. On the rosés, as we get to the color range that we want, as we filter it, as we find, and as we're getting close, I will tend to do a tannin addition late in the process and use a white tannin, so I'm not impacting color, but I want to bind that color in and keep it stable as it goes into the bottle, and it's going to stay there for a while. The flash gum types of products will also help stabilize some of that. But once I get to the color I like, I want to stabilize that so it doesn't tend towards the orange, because in a year in the bottle and they will get very orange because those color molecules are so unstable.
Any other questions on the chat, Ode?
Yes, we do. Thanks, Kevin. Do you benchmark your rosé color absorbency through élevage and then in the bottle? That's, I think, a question for Cedric. Oh, okay.
No, the experiment, yeah, it depends. Yeah, it would be, if you produce rosé wine, yes, you have to measure all the, as we said, it's better to act early, even during the alcoholic fermentation. And then at bottling time, if the color is nice, you don't have much to do, actually. It should be okay. So you have to control your SO2. You have to maybe decide if you want a little bit of only the aging or use the yeast derived products to mimic that, and then bottle. But if you have too much color or too much orange side already, you can still act just before bottling and do a correction with PVPP or other product. So it's still possible for sure. So more and more people are doing that early to prevent and preserve the aroma. But as we did in the lab, and it's also could be a correction before bottling for sure.
I have a quick follow-up question actually for Kyle. Just to confirm, you're using your PVPP on your rosés pre-fermentation?
No, generally post-fermentation, and it's
Okay.
really only if we feel the need,
And at what dosage rate, basically?
Oh, I generally go average.
Okay.
I'll do a bench trial. Yeah.
Good. Do a bench trial. That's a one. I'm so glad you just said bench trial. I try to encourage young new winemakers here in the Midwest to take the time to do the bench trials. So I'm glad to hear such good habits.
It's
Uh,
not
and
often. I don't have the patience.
And the other, I just noticed at the end of the chat session that the person who asked about benchmarking color, do any of you three winemakers measure your color either at blending or at bottling and try to hit those same numbers every harvest, or are you not that concerned about it?
I'll go real quick. No, I'm pretty loosey goosey, I guess. Like the most I do is we'll do a number of picks, and so kind of like what Cedric was just saying is do a first pick. If I like it, maybe we'll schedule another one, but generally not because it's a low maturity level. But generally, I kind of know, at least from my site, about the bricks where I want it and what I'm gonna get. But definitely doing a number of picks helps with kind of knowing what you're gonna get, or at least an idea of what you're gonna get.
And we haven't talked too much about the pressing cycle, which is super important in white, rosé,
Yeah.
and because it's beginning of the cycle of with low pressure is something completely different
Okay.
of the end. Huh? So how much pressure you get?
Kyle mentioned that he does press cuts.
Mm-hmm.
Kevin and Lane, do you guys? I think Kevin mentioned he does do a press cut from time to time. So Lane, we haven't heard from you yet. Do you use PVPP? Are you overly concerned with color? You want to try to get it same every year? And do you do press cuts to try to get less color towards the end of pressing?
Yeah, so my only experience making rosé so far has just been blending Edelweiss and Marquette. So I haven't had to worry about anything like that, and that I did just blend to the exact color that I wanted, and it just turned out to taste pretty good too. So in the end, I'd rather have it taste good, but consumers are super picky about color when it comes to rosé and what they see on the shelf, and so I think it's an important thing to consider. But yeah, that's all my experience I've got with rosé so far.
Cool.
That's a good point. That blending, you can often zero in on exact color, you know, if you have blending components, and that can kind of make it easy and take a lot of the guesswork out of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you mentioned bench trials, Drew. I did the one rosé that I've got that's very, very dark. I did bench trials with PVP this year, trying to take additional color out. And I used 40 grams per hectoliter, 80 and 120 as my bench trial. I wasn't concerned necessarily about aromas at the moment. I was trying to see what the effect was on that. And as dark as this wine was, I could really tell very little difference in the results with those 3 additional levels. And 120 grams per hectoliter is a pretty heavy dose.
Yeah.
If I'm dealing with astringency in the wine, I'm at 10 to 20 grams per hectoliter is the doses that I've used, just looking back at some of my records.
You know,
So
something
was-
that no one's really talked about either is just like aging vessels. I mean, rosé is not aged very long, but you know what you ferment in and maybe what you do élevage in prior to bottling. So, you know, your wine is going to oxidize in barrel a little bit, and so if you have a pink, it might dull a little bit and go more, you know, to an orange copper, versus being in a stainless steel tank, and it would, you know, the color is going to be way more stable. So I'm curious, do you guys do any, you know, partial stainless, partial barrel, concrete, amphora, whatever?
I don't think there's a concrete tank within 1,000 miles of here. And I love seeing the pictures of your pyramid fermenters. That looks very interesting.
It's fun.
Tell me again, was that a 500 liter or?
Yeah.
500 liter. What a neat little tool to have.
Yeah.
So again, Lane and Kevin, are you doing any partial barrel maturation, or actually just Kevin? Are you doing any barrel maturation of any of the rosés, or all just in tank?
We're just kind of starting to get our barrel program up and running, going through some of the old barrels that we have here. So in the future, I'd definitely like to do a barrel aged rosé. I think they're really nice.
If any of you ever get a chance to taste a barrel aged rosé from either from Kyle or from Beckman, they make a Grenache rosé that is literally it's one of my top 3 desert island wines. If I had one wine, and somebody was talking, I believe Cedric was talking earlier about the popularity of rosés. It can be seasonal. You wonder why you're making them in January and February, and it does become apparent in the heat of summer. They're also extremely food friendly wines. They usually have bright acidity. They're not heavy in flavor, so they can go with spicy foods, and they can go with international cuisines, and you know, salads, which we tend to eat when it's hot. You don't want to have a red wine with a salad, but maybe you want something a little more than just a white wine. I'm crazy about rosés, and we make some great rosés out here in the Midwest. Again, you get to play. We have these grapes that tend to be higher in acidity, and so you can really dial in the sweetness to balance the sweetness and the acidity just perfectly. Some people are better at it than others. And then one other comment I wanted to make was about Kyle's point about less alcoholic wines. I've been picking at lower Brixes. As Kyle will remember, back 15 and 20 years ago in Santa Barbara County, a lot of people were just making these huge, ripe, overripe, fruit bomby wines that could easily get up to 16%. And frankly, they're hard to enjoy because if not just, of course, the excess alcohol and all that does to your trigeminal senses and all that, and of course you get inebriated so much quicker. I'm over the past 10 years, I've also decided that more restrained alcohol is a lot better, if for no other reason than you can enjoy a bit much of it without ruining your health. Yeah, a lot of the people I admire. Kyle, you of course know Adam Tolmack, one of the original guys from Ojai Vineyard. One of the reasons I love his reds are they are so restrained in alcohol, real nice bright acidity, beautifully balanced wines.
Yeah, something he does that it's not very uncommon, but something I know that he, when he's done fermenting, he presses straight to barrel, and I'm pretty sure that that is what's linked to his like fruitiness of his wines and his um, sort of fruit forward wines. It's kind of a signature of his. I've been trying to do that in the last 2 years a little bit, play around with that, just to see if we could bring in, because we have really tannic wines here, but I want to bring a little bit more fruit into them, you know? So anyways, yeah, learned that from Adam.
So we talked a lot about rosé wines. Can we still talk about rosé, but also orange wines, especially focusing on SO2? So what is the SO2 management that was done on your rosé or your orange wines, Kyle, and others in the panel?
So for rosé, you know, rosé should be, in my opinion, they should be simple. Not simple, but they should be delicious, right? You want a crisp, nicely acidic, nice aromatic, delicious rosé. So they need to be clean. So a good healthy dose of sulfur that's gonna, you know, will let them last a year in the market at least. So you know, 30 ppm is sufficient, I'd say. The orange wines are, you know, it's a little bit different story. They're a little bit more.
Sorry to interrupt you, Kyle.
Yeah.
I think you're talking about SO2 at bottling.
Yeah.
What about use of SO2 for orange wines? Are you using zero SO2 prior to fermentation, or are you adding a dose up front?
Yeah. So I've done everything. I've done you know, 20, 30 parts at crush, and I've done zero. It really depends on the shape of the fruit. But you know, yeah, it definitely seems that some sulfur helps, but definitely don't want to nuke it like you would nuke, you know, maybe a Sauvignon Blanc or Rosé. So I think 20 ppm is sufficient. And then typically I don't do anything more to orange wine in barrel for the entire time it's in barrel until I move it from barrel to tank. I'll maybe do 10 parts before bottling, and that's it. You know, the tannin, I think, really stabilizes the wine and gives them longevity. So yeah, I've also done zero sulfur, but I also want a clean, you know, wine that's drinkable. So it's a fine line of, you know, you don't want something that's really nasty and full of VA. Some VA is okay. You know,
Well,
it's
I think your point about the condition of the fruit. If you
yeah,
have a perfect crop come in that is as clean as you've ever seen,
sure.
you know, heck, why bother? But if it's at all compromised, a sulfur dose based on the condition of the fruit and its overall ripeness, I agree with that 100%.
Right. If you have good
I'll,
pH, you have to use, you know, use less sulfur. Yeah.
We've only got a couple minutes left. I just wanted to mention really quickly, I have done a large experimental lot of orange wine with Itasca. So I destemmed it, but then I returned all the stems. I made no sulfur addition. I let it start naturally fermenting, a wild fermentation. After about day 4 or 5, it wasn't active enough for me, so I added our standard white wine yeast, which is DB10. It finished fermenting in about 12 days. I kept it in skin contact for 3 weeks, for 21 days. And only then, let's see, about halfway through, I inoculated it with ML, completed ML. I pressed it off. I let it settle for about a week after that, and then I racked it off into cold stabilization. And it's a delicious wine. It took a while to come together in the bottle. At first, it was a little too weird, but eventually, after a year now in bottle, it's quite delicious. But again, I think it may have been Itasca can even just because Itasca can easily be ripened to 25 bricks doesn't make that the best choice. more I work with Itasca, I like the 22, 23 bricks. I think makes a more balanced wine. Ode, anything else? We've only got a minute or two
Well,
left.
I have
I
a
just-
little.
Yeah, I wanted to hear from Lane and Josh because I
Yeah.
see Josh is with us still. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
I have a question. So when we're making, if we're set out to make these orange wines, are we set out to make these orange wines and are we using PVPP? We know this is in our back pocket. We're making these wines to use PV, or are we going to use activated carbon, or are we just going to pick these grapes off of color, right? So we're in the Midwest here, and we have tons of anthocyanins and tons of things going for us, but they all seem to fall out here during fermentation. So to make a orange wine, if you will, use something like Le Crescent or some sort of Frontenac Gris. Are we picking these grapes off of acid content, or are we picking them looking at color? That's a big question that I have, and maybe for you too, Kevin, here, because I think Kevin's the only one working with cold climate hybrids here. But I had worked with the cold climate hybrid my second vintage and wanted to make an orange wine, and I worked with Frontenac Gris and barreled it and used a lot of some weird phenolics and color carbon and everything, and it ended up smelling like ham. So I just wonder if we're using, if we're going into our fermentations planning on using activated carbon, or if we're going to use PVPP. I don't think we need to do that in with these hybrids. This is just kind of a different thing for us. We have plenty of color compounds and tons of phenolics. We just lose them somewhere during the fermentation phase.
I think from my experience, Josh, it's trying to pick earlier in the year. So keep the bricks levels down. We, of course, struggle a little bit with acidity on that, but it is, of all things, it's difficult to get some of our growers to pick them early enough for me.
Yeah.
I would much rather see them at 22 or 23 bricks. The Frontenac family is a challenge with that because the acid is so sky high. I was going to ask others, what grapes are you using for your rosés and for your?
Well, I know you can ask Lane here. He's the first one I know in the state of Iowa that's really tried to make an orange wine, and he made a damn good one this year with Brianna, right?
Oh, Le Crescent.
Le Crescent, yeah. So Lane wholeheartedly made an orange wine this year, and he's the only one I've talked to who's done it, so he could tell you. Tell him.
I've had a couple of
I don't
crescent
want to hold
wines.
people if they need to go, or do we have enough time for that, Ode, or?
No, we are running out of time, but
Well, that's okay. I don't want to keep people if they need to go, but yeah, they can email me or anything like that if they have questions about my orange wine. So.
all right. Thank you so much. So yeah, we are running out of time, but thank you very much, everybody, for participating in this webinar. Thank you to all panelists to be with us today and for the great presentation. Thank you, Kai. Thank you, Cedric, for all those nice presentations, really useful. I'm sure we didn't answer to all the questions, but feel free to email us and we will share the question to the speakers. So before closing, just a reminder, the next webinar is going to be in December 10. We're going to talk about color management, but for red wines. So join us. It's going to be the last of the year. And also, please complete the survey that you will receive. You're going to receive the link for the survey. So please complete it, because that's what we need to know which topics you're looking for future webinars. It's only going to take you 2 minutes. And so on that note, Thanks again very much, and happy Thanksgiving, and see you on December 10th. Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
all.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye. Thanks.
All right, take care. Good to see
Bye.
you.